So you've got a choice of two cars. They're both exactly the same price. One is 2 years old, but it's done 100,000 miles. The other is 7 years old, but it's only done 30,000 miles. Which you choose? In this video, we're going to look at considerations that you need to take regarding the service history, the use of the car, and also some essential checks that you should do just to avoid being caught out when you buy a car with an abnormal mileage showing. So when you're buying a used car, what mileage is too high a mileage? What do you tend to shy away from? In this video, we're just going to discuss the topic of mileages when it comes to buying a used car and what is a particularly high mileage. We're going to look at two examples. Please let me know in the comments what you would actually decide to do out of these two examples. So we've got a 2-year-old car that's done 100,000 miles, and we've got a 7-year-old car that's only done 30,000 miles. So out of those two, which would you choose and why? Please let me know your reasons, and I will talk you through my reasoning on making a decision as to which of those two cars I would actually buy. So for a lot of people, they will bandy figures around of 100,000 miles is the limit for a car, and as the mileage starts approaching that, they will look to replace the car. For some other people, they start to say that the lifespan of an engine is 70,000 miles, but in reality we see cars going on for 1 million miles or more. So is the mileage such a big factor when you go out and buy a used car? Well, in my opinion, it's not. The mileage is inconsequential. It's more important to know how the vehicle has been used and how it has been looked after. They're the factors that are going to have the biggest bearing on your success with the car's reliability after you've acquired it. So my own personal experience, I bought a 1992 Rover 220 GTI, lovely 2-litre engine. It was a fantastic car. In fact, that was really my first project car back in the day. And I set torque cars up because of that car, just to document the problems and difficulties that I had. So that car had a relatively low mileage when I first bought it, but I had no end of problems with it. In the end, after about 3 years of ownership, I'd spent about 7,000 just fixing things that kept breaking on this car. So I certainly learned a lot from that experience, and I'm going to pass on those tips to you through this video. It cost me a new engine, a new gearbox, a new clutch, about 4 or 5 clutch cables, and lots of other little ancillaries that were bolted onto the engine. So what was going wrong? Well, it turns out that the previous owner's idea of servicing was just to top the oil up when the oil light came on. So the oil was fairly thick and sludgy when I got it. There was no evidence whatsoever that the car had ever been serviced or looked after in its life. So this is the first red flag really if you're buying a used car, to get one that's got a good service history. The other factor is to consider how the car has been used in its life. If the 100,000 mile car in our example has done mainly long distance motorway miles, and that mileage has been clocked up relatively quickly, then that potentially has substantially less wear and tear on the engine and the car's components than a 30,000 mile car that's only been driven for say 5 or 10 miles a week to the local corner shop and back, where most of that driving has been done on the cold engine. So with those two factors in mind, the service history and the use of the car, let's just break apart those two choices that we're presented with. So first of all, we take the 7-year-old car with just 30,000 miles on the clock. So I would really want to know how those miles have been achieved on that car. Has it only been used on short journeys, or has it had relatively few long journeys? Has the car been serviced regularly? Now, the service intervals in most cars is about 10,000 miles, sometimes 12,000 miles for the long life service intervals. It does vary from time to time, but it usually also specifies a time factor. So I would be looking to make sure that that car has been serviced within the time factor, because the miles were certainly not being clocked up. So if that car had only had one service, say at 15,000 miles, I would not be happy to buy that car at all. And if that car had made multiple short journeys, I would certainly question whether I wanted to get involved with that car. But again, if that car has been used very gently, you could also argue that the engine itself is so new, it's barely been broken in, and you've got a lot more life left in the engine. You really do need to talk to the owner and look at the service history, the service documents of the vehicle, and just make sure that that car has been looked after as best as possible, and that you've got the best chance of making the most of that 30,000 mile engine despite the vehicle's age. So moving on to the 100,000 mile car, it's only 2 years old. In a lot of cases, it may still be under the manufacturer's warranty, although they often do specify an upper mileage limit. But certainly manufacturer warranties, they go for up to about 5 years in some cases. Some makers even exceed the 5-year warranty period. But getting a car that's so close to the warranty period, it's reassuring because you know that the components the manufacturer still expects to be in good working order. So the age deterioration has certainly not started to kick in. Again, you need to ask how those miles have been clocked up. Was it used as a taxi or a delivery vehicle, where most of those 100,000 miles were on very short stop-start urban driving situations where there's lots of gear changes, lots of changes in speed, and that would increase the wear and tear on the engine? Or has it been clocked up on those long motorway stretches where most of the time you're in 5th or 6th gear and the car is not really doing very much work other than maintaining a constant steady speed? So I would still look for a regular service history. Obviously, you wouldn't be doing the annual service if you're knocking up 50,000 miles in 1 year. I would expect to see about 4 or 5 stamps per year in the service book to just show that the oil has been changed, the car has been inspected, and all the other ancillary components that you would expect to be changed in a service have been changed. So again, I would be looking for evidence that that vehicle has been looked after. So again, it's a tough decision, isn't it? A 2-year-old car or a 7-year-old car. Now, it's probably fair to say that the 2-year-old car is better looking. It's probably got some newer features that you wouldn't get on the older car, so that would certainly make it more appealing. The older car, though, is generally much cheaper to insure. So if you're in a country or a region where the age of the driver is a factor when it comes to the car insurance, then certainly buying an older car will get you a discount off the premium. So that could also be a factor to consider, to take into account. And also in some areas, you've got zones that you can only drive into if your car meets certain emissions regulations. Otherwise, you maybe have to pay some kind of fee to drive in those areas, or maybe you're not even allowed to drive in those areas. So again, the 2-year-old car is more likely to meet those modern stringent emission standards than the older 7-year vehicle. But again, the 7-year-old car is not that old really in the grand scheme of things, and it has only got 30,000 miles on the clock. So please let me know in the comments what you would decide out of those 2 cars and your reasoning and the factors that you would take into account. So what are some of the things that you should check to just make sure that you don't get caught out when you're buying one of these 2 cars? Well, firstly, low mileages, you want to check that that mileage is genuine. So you would look on the obvious wear places inside the car. So the steering wheel, the gear change selector, and the pedals. If there's signs of excessive wear, if the pattern, for example, has started to wear off and it started to become smooth and shiny, much like my head, that can be a sign that maybe the mileage is much higher than that's indicated on the dashboard. So that would be something that I would walk away from. I would also, just while I'm walking around the car, check the overall condition of the car. I would take the dipstick out and just check the oil. I'm looking there for a reasonably good colour of oil. If it's black and sludgy, that would indicate that it's not had a change in a very, very long time. And if the level was particularly low, that might indicate to me that this is a driver that only really tops it up when the oil warning light comes on, that they don't go through those routine checks that you should be doing on your car. I would also expect that the fluid levels in the other areas of the car have all been topped up, the brake fluid, the expansion bottle, and even the washer bottle, because they're all signs that someone has a little mechanical sympathy and they're trying to look after the car. So when I start the car up, I would be listening out for rattles inside the engine. So rattles when the engine is cold can often indicate wear that has occurred inside the engine. You'll also be looking for smoke coming out of the exhaust pipe. So most cars, when they're cold, they will smoke more than when they are warmed up and running efficiently and effectively. So you're looking for abnormal smoke, so huge clouds of white smoke. Blue smoke is always a red flag in my mind because that usually indicates it's burning oil. And if that doesn't subside at all by the time the engine has warmed up, I would certainly be looking to walk away from this deal and not consider that car, as it's probably just going to be a money pit that soaks up lots of money again. Check the service record very carefully. There's the essential items like the clutch. The essential items need really to have been replaced. I would like to see evidence of cam belt or cam chain changes on the higher mileage car, providing it's obviously got one of those items. Some cars don't have cam belts or cam chains, but if that was the case, that is a problem area if that breaks, and they tend to degrade with age. So even on the 30,000 mile car, if it's over the sort of 5 year specified period that the manufacturer recommends for a change, I would expect that to have been done. Make sure that the mileage adds up with the service history. Has things changed? Did it start off as a high mileage car and then it's just not been used, it's been sat around? Did it start off maybe as a very low mileage car and all the miles have been clocked up in the last 12 months, for example? Find out what the history of the car is and how the car's been used. Ask the owner how they've been using it. Ask the owner why it's got such an unusual mileage, if it's particularly high or particularly low. Just talk to them about it. And most people will be quite honest and upfront about why that mileage is not an average mileage and it's abnormally high or abnormally low. And from that, you can get a feel for how the car has been used. So that low mileage bargain or that high mileage bargain could well turn out to be a money pit if you're not careful. So the takeaway really from this video is not to just go by the mileage, the condition of the car, the way it's been looked after and serviced, and also the way it has been used through the last few years of ownership of the vehicle will have a big bearing on how reliable that car is and how many hidden bills that you've got when you get that car. So we've got videos coming up on those million mile cars. We're going to look at some of the secrets behind having a car that goes on for 1 million miles, and hopefully that'll inspire us to just take a few steps to make sure that our car lasts as long as possible. Thanks for watching. Please boot that like button because that really does help us to get out there, and subscribe if you haven't done so. And I've lined this video up for you that you should find really interesting. Thanks for watching.